It's my honor to introduce this next sort of interviewee, I guess. We'll do this together and chat a little bit about investment perspectives in this really interesting world that we're in. I thought the last two sessions were just amazing, actually hearing from the channel, both with Optiv and also with Ingram. What I took away from that is, obviously the bullishness that both of them had in the cybersecurity segment going forward into 2022. Obviously, with the huge years they both had in 2021 and really portending a even bigger year in 2022. So, interesting analysis from both of them who see a lot of procurement, a lot of opportunities out there. Same is true with the sell side analysts, both Sterling Audi and Rob, showing that they believe customer spending was going to increase, in some cases even bigger than they did in 2021, going into 2022 now. And a little bit of concern about valuations with the interest rates and things, but great perspectives on the public markets from two of the great people in the Wall Street community. So it's a great honor to have Nadav Safrir here. Nadav, oh my gosh, thank you for joining me, my friend. It's great to have you. And for those of you who don't know Nadav, this is one of the unbelievable pioneers in the cybersecurity industry. Nadav was the former head brigadier general of the Israeli Defense Force 8200 unit. For all you cyber professionals, you should know what the 8200 unit is. And he led that organization, but in recent times, he is the founder, co-founder, and managing director of Team 8, which is one of the most prolific and exciting incubators and investors in the cyber ecosystem. Nadav has helped build many companies. He's created a very unique platform. I'll let him tell it in just a second, but a man who understands the threat landscape, a man who understands the investment landscape, a man who understands the business landscape of growing companies and building companies, probably the most powerful investment platform to build companies in the world today. Nadav Safrir, thank you so much for joining me, my friend. Hey, tell everybody just for a minute, just your perspective on Team 8. We got a lot of people here who don't know everything about Team 8. So talk a little bit about what Team 8 is for a second and give them some perspective, if you would.
Sure, thanks, Dave, and thanks a lot for that opening. I hope it's recorded. I'm gonna have my wife listen to it afterwards. We live in a crazy world now. Capital has is more abundant than at any time in history, probably. On the one hand, on the other hand, I think founders are looking for real value add, especially when you're speaking about the more experienced, capable founders. And so creating real value beyond capital is super important in this crazy competitive market. And let's face it, as investors, this is a founder's market. We have a lot more capital chasing, few really star quality founders. And, in this kind of environment, which started a few years ago, we decided to sort of create a new model, which we call Foundry. So basically, we built 1 to 2 company years based on a long and deep period of, understanding what's broken through a membrane of to the village of CISOs that we have around the world, academia, et cetera, creating a thesis about new technologies that are going to emerge or new threats that we think are going to emerge around the corner, bringing a long and a deep validation process, which is supported by 50 in-house company builders that do this year after year, time after time. And then finally joining forces with founders that we not only give them their first money in, usually a check of up to $10 million, but also bring the whole platform to work for them so that they can focus on getting to a product market fit swiftly and connecting them to the customers, the academia, the investors through partnerships that we have, just such as the one we have with NightDragon. So we're ultra early stage. We literally start companies, but joining forces with NightDragon, and I'll say it with you specifically, Dave, with your experience and leadership in this in the growth market, this creates a lot of value for our founders. So all in all, we start companies from scratch. We do invest, but then go and work for our founders. And this, we hope that we can prove that this is more of a deterministic model than a probabilistic model in terms of every company that we start must succeed.
It's amazing what you've built, Nadav, and I know you're shy. By the way, I'm recording what you just said too, so I'll play that back later on Night Dragon. But you've had some incredible successes, and I want to get to some of the trends and things that we're seeing in the market. But I mean, congratulations. I'd love for you to rattle them off for a minute, but you've had a couple exits already. You've had a couple massive markups. You've had some unicorns. Maybe just comment a couple areas that have had some success so far. Is it 5 years, right, roughly right now with Teammate?
Yeah, even a little bit more. Like we're approaching our 7th year. 2022 will be our 7th year. Yeah, we've built, I think, interesting companies in terms of the monetary outcome and return on investment for our LPs. Our first fund is already at 5x. Our second fund is at 2.5x in terms of return, but we're at an early stage. I'm more proud to say that we started 10 companies so far. 4, as you said, have already exited. All the rest are up and running. 2 of them are already unicorns. They're leading their market. And today that we already have 12 portfolio companies, there's also a nice portfolio in terms of the diversity of the portfolio. So, our first exit was a company called Signia, which we still own 20% of. That was was a great run. It was a services company, sort of a Mandiant competitor. We put $5 million. We sold it for $250 a couple of years later. So that's on one hand. On the other end, we have Clarity, which Dave is the vice chairman of, which is now the leaders in extended IoT. We just acquired a competitor for $400 million to create the de facto leader in this market. And somewhere in the middle of that, we have companies like Duality, which is ultra deep tech, which is redefining how data collaboration is going to look like in the future, based on homomorphic encryption and some groundbreaking mathematics out of MIT. So it's diverse. Each company leads a different area, but together we're starting to have real impact.
It's amazing watching the Israeli ecosystem, not just the meticulous care that I've watched Teammate create in terms of, doing the homework, checking with the market, like you said, the CISO village, helping you design a product, validate a category, come up with a way to get it through different gates so that it really is foundationally strong for the long haul. It's been a very impressive process, Nadav, watching that. I don't see that anywhere else in the world for sure. Where do you think we're at? I mean, I'm really curious, boy, because you see, you saw offense, you saw defense, you understand the threat landscape better than just about any human on this planet. What do you think the threat environment's like right now? Just talk about that for a second. 2021, coming out of this pandemic year, all the years you've watched this, what was 2021 like for you from a threat environment?
I'll start with the good news about, maybe 2020 and 2021. The pandemic, as bad as it's been and still is, could have been much worse if we didn't have the digital infrastructure that we built, right? I mean, 95% of the workforce, literally overnight, starting to work remotely, kept the lights on. And, the pandemic has been devastating for many people, many industries in many countries, but it could have been far worse. You just have to go back in history to 1918, and you know what it looks like when you don't have a digital infrastructure that you can rely on. So I think, first of all, some good news. Having said that, we obviously have seen a surge in ransomware attacks. Specifically there, I think it's going to get much worse because I don't think we've seen the real big ones. I think, we've seen ransomware. So, the simple where, I encrypt your data, you don't pay me, you don't get it. Now we're seeing, yes, I've encrypted your data. If you don't want to pay for that, I also have your data unencrypted. I'm going to put it out there. We believe that the next step is interfering with your data, which is much worse. because that goes after the fundamental sort of very important quality of trust that, if I encrypted your data, you don't have it. If I stole your data, I can give it to someone. If I manipulated your data, it's a totally different story. And we think that that's sort of the next wave in ransomware. Another very important place to look at is AI. Again, there's one thing, using AI to automate my offensive tools, making your SOC a historian rather than something that you can really count on. But if I can actually go after the algorithm that runs your AI, again, that creates havoc. And so if you ask me, I don't think we've seen the big one. What I'm really concerned about is those attacks that goes after the fundamental trust that runs financial systems, that runs insurance systems, let's face it, that run a democracy.
Yeah, we've watched that. I mean, Adab, you've seen it, I've seen it. I used to say when I was CEO of McAfee, we had this quantity virus, Trojan worm problem. Then it became a quality issue where you had highly targeted attacks, stealing information, stealing intellectual property. Then we entered this era of information warfare, and we watched that in the election processes, the democracies. And, where you're pretending is, wow, now we could even get into not just, sort of trying to change information, but, bringing down systems as a part of changing information is a whole nother level of disruption that can occur. And it's, it's there for the bad guys to do. The capability is here. We just need motivation. And when capability and motivation catch each other, it's amazing. Talk about, you're involved with building companies. How many have you built so far? What's Teammate's total number at now?
So in the Cyber Plus, what we call Cyber Plus, we've started 12 companies so far. We've extended our model a couple of years ago into two areas. One is we not only cyber, but also fintech, because we think that some of the underlying technologies for financial services are very similar to what we see in cyber. And beyond that, we see the evolution of cyber as not just defense or security, but rather enabling. And for financial services and fintech, this is very, very relevant. And on top of that, and that's one of the areas that we find this synergy and collaboration with Teammate and NightDragon so important, is that once we have a thesis and we've validated it, before we start building a company, we go out and make sure that there isn't any early stage team that we like a lot that's already doing something that is in the right direction. And that's why we created Teammate Capital that goes from seed plus to A minus, or seed plus to A. And so we have a funnel of ideas, of problems, of challenges, of things that are broken, and thesis and ideas that we want to build. Sometimes if there's nobody else doing it and we think it's a high barrier to entry, we'll build it ourselves in our foundry. Otherwise, we can go and invest. And so 2022 or 2021, it's the first year where we also made our own investments. And so beyond building 10 companies and 2 that are still in stealth, we also invested in 6 companies. So all in all, I'd say 16 cybersecurity companies so far.
Pretty amazing. All right, I'm going to put you on the spot and talk about a couple of new ones that you are getting involved with. And I know, by the way, amazing how early you've seen some markets, because one of your great successes was you built a crypto infrastructure company, Curve, that you sold to PayPal. I forget how many employees it was, but it was for a very large price tag, which was pretty amazing and way ahead of its time. So what categories are you looking for, right now, or what's on your mind most?
Yeah, well, crypto, I think, is still big. Curve was a good run. But in all honesty, we believe that it's still a blue ocean out there. Not just cryptocurrencies per se, but the use of blockchain to standardize and to tokenize real world assets. And we're seeing more and more governments understanding that they can't fight it. They must regulate it. And so it's becoming more and more ubiquitous, more and more standardized. And we think that that's still a blue ocean. So that's one place. Another place where we've made an investment in is, looking at, the future of computation, obviously. So quantum computing, we are not going to try and create and get into the big boys game, which takes billions of investments and sometimes, decades to make breakthroughs. But we are looking to, with classic technologies, we are looking to create the software that will run the future of qubits, right? Because there are about a few dozen people that actually get it in the world. If we want thousands and tens of thousands to use it, they'll need some kind of infrastructure and framework to use it. So quantum is another place that we're looking at. Usage of quantum, but also what happens when quantum becomes a reality and everything we know about encryption becomes obsolete. So we're also looking into technologies like that. We started a company called Duality, which is looking to make use of concepts of homomorphic encryption, as I said before. And going forward, I think we're going to see more and more infrastructure going to remote and virtual. So virtual reality, the whole new metaverse, if you like, I think will open new opportunities for attackers. And so that's another area that we're looking at.
Yeah, it's interesting. With NightDragon, we tend to look at things a little further down the line, right? Growth stage and beyond. So we already know there's a TAM there, kind of a total addressable market there. And our goal was to scale, at least in NightDragon's case, scale them into the public markets. Whereas you're looking at the next threat, the next problem that's emerging, which is very interesting because we like to see what you're doing and then, figure out what might be coming down the pipe here as well. How are you thinking, Nadav? I mean, what's changed a lot this past year is just these, and you heard this from the two sell-side analysts, like hyperscale, right? We're watching companies go from 0 to $1 billion in revenue in record times now, like literally 0 to $1 billion. And they talked about the rule of 100 now, not the rule of 40, right? The rule of 100 is 70, 80% growth, 10, 20, 30% operating margins, like a whole new sort of, in order to compete at a big level, it takes really different approaches to grow companies. And I'm curious if you're thinking about that too, as you build companies now and you invest in the companies, how does the word hyperscale kind of enter into the way you're thinking about this stuff?
It's a great question, and from where I see it, it's making the competition fierce because we're seeing super early stage because of the expectation for hyperscale. We're also seeing the checks becoming much bigger at a much earlier stage. Right. And in many ways, if you don't have that capital, and if you're competing against 2 or 3 others that have that capital, it becomes almost impossible to compete. And so, the bets are, you're seeing bigger bets on more players. So if in the past we used to see, a couple of medium-sized bets on a couple of players, now we're seeing super large bets, sometimes on up to 10 players that are going after the same market. Obviously, the market is growing very fast. The need is growing very fast, but I believe that the capital is coming in faster than the market is going to be able to absorb. So I don't know if this is wishful thinking or something that I really believe will happen. I think we'll see valuations going back to some normalcy. We're already seeing some of the SPACs slowing down. We're seeing expectations, like you said, for margins and, even, God forbid, profitability for companies. And so where we sit, our advantage is that at the end of the day, we only need to build 1 or 2 companies a year and make very specific bets. Once we build those companies, we have to bring all the resources. And if that means a really fat check, if that means acquiring a competitor, we'll do it.
It's amazing. I think back, and we were talking about this in the previous segments, but when I was CEO of FireEye, like I knew hyperscale had to be the case. I joined there about 2012, and there was a bunch of competition. Like you said, there's 4 or 5 companies who built a sandbox kind of virtual machine, put in a network. And my whole goal was to beat them with a go-to-market strategy and scale that company, and get to the IPO market first and get the premium and do all that. And I was really proud. We raised 55 million in our mezzanine round, right? And I was like, wow, we just raised 55 million. This is a lot of capital to get there.
That's a seed today.
Right. And even now you're starting to see A rounds in a much bigger way, hundreds of millions even. What was Clarity's last raise of capital?
400
million. Right. So, this is the game we're in now. That's a little bit different than I think we even were just pre-pandemic. So, it'll be interesting to watch. Sorry.
Yeah, no, look, and it's so what does this mean? You as an investor, it's become a much, it's always been highly competitive, but now it's ultra competitive. Move faster, pay more, decide faster. It's tough. And some of these companies, for me, and I think we share this, Dave, we will support a company and a founder. The first and foremost condition is that we have a leader, CEO in place that we trust 100%. Otherwise, I think, deploying this amount of capital is too dangerous.
Yeah, I always talk about the 3 T's: team, tech, and TAM, right? And it starts with the team. And at least from an investor perspective, I look for a strong team first. And if that team is an A team, it's amazing what can get done with a really good team. Even if your tech and your TAM isn't as good, the team figures that out. And next thing you know, as an investor, you have a lot of success, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in today's market, when we say team, I would say, focus on the CEO. Yeah. And when you say TAM, focus on how fast it's growing, not necessarily of how big it is, but how fast it's growing.
Yeah. The other part that we've seen, and I think you've done this better than anybody, is the more specialized and the deeper you can be. Like, you do so much work on that design phase, and your intellectual property of Team 8 is really understanding the market before you build a company. And a lot of what I try to do with NightDragon is become very specialized at go-to-market and really help companies scale themselves with their go-to-market once they've had their idea, so that we can hyper-scale them into the public markets and valuations. And I think that's our differentiator at the end of the day, in a lot of ways, is to design that model where the generalists can't compete with us so much, because we can help so much more over a longer period of time. Fast forward to 2022 now. We're in 2022, and I'm curious, you mentioned a couple of tidbits there in terms of, will we see a little market correction? What are you seeing? Do you see an elevated threat landscape of the same size and scale as we saw before? Do you agree with the customer spending growing, same proportions? Like, what's your views there?
I do. I think in terms of budgets, I think budgets will continue to grow. I think we'll see attackers getting more and more sophisticated. At almost any industry that you're looking right now, the digital transformation pace has accelerated dramatically. To be honest, even way beyond what we believe can happen, especially exacerbated by the pandemic, which is just continuing to push to more digital and faster. That dependence on digital and the pace of digital transformation is creating a plethora of unprecedented opportunities for attackers, all the way from nation states to petty crime, right? So that will happen more and more. They're going to start using better and better technologies. If you look at what's happening on the dark side, on the attacker side, on the criminal side, it's become a very sophisticated market with very sophisticated supply chain and focus and in different groups, working and collaborating with each other. So I think, yes, we're going to see more digital transformation faster. The threat's going to grow, hence the need is going to grow. And also, you and I know this. I mean, we serve on boards ourselves and we advise to boards, etc. The level of awareness is growing dramatically. So I think, yes, the answer is 2022, 2023, in the foreseeable future, we're going to see more reliance on digital, more threat, faster move to cloud, etc. Does that support the amount of innovation and startups and the amount of capital that's pouring in there? Well, I think when you match that with what's happening to the incumbents, it might.
Yeah.
Because they're just not keeping up with the pace. The all-inclusive providers of cybersecurity just don't provide it. And I think if we can bring real value to strong leaders, when on the early stage, it's that design partnership, understanding what's broken, what people are willing to pay for, what the competition looks like. And then as we move into the growth, which you guys are doing, providing them with the ability for hyper growth through channels, for example. I think if we focus there with real value add, I think for the most part, we can find the winners.
Last question for you here. Love to ask you about, I mean, when I kind of look at what happened in 2021 and I see what the US government at least is kind of saying in terms of their biggest challenges. It was like supply chain issues, software supply chain, hardware supply chains, the vulnerabilities in all those supply chains. We watched the Log4j issue, I guess is considered a supply chain, SolarWinds supply chains, Russian playbooks, Chinese playbooks, really attacking that model, is creating a really interesting set of problems, going forward here. Aside from that data integrity issue, what else jumps out at you? Anything big in 2022 threat-wise that's keeping you up at night? Industrial, that's an area that I worry a lot about. Something else jump out at you there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say a couple of. The first one, you already gave a hint. Industrial, Internet of Things, or what we now call it clarity, extended Internet of Things. The belief that anything can be air-gapped is dead. We now know that everything is either connected for a good reason or a bad reason. So definitely. And look, I mean, we've seen like glimpses of attacks that go after critical infrastructure, but we haven't seen like a light out in a major metropolitan, right? Because of a cyber attack. We haven't seen that yet. Will we see it in 2022? Hopefully not. Is it possible? Of course it is. We know it is. We know these systems are vulnerable, whether it's nation state, because of some strategic incentive, or, a major ransomware attack. Can that happen? Yes. I think so that's one area. That's one area for sure. Another two areas which I think we should be looking at is, one is 5G. And how that's going to affect the world. I think 5G is becoming ubiquitous. I think we're going to see more and more industries, people, cities, governments, etc., industries, relying on 5G. So we'll also see attacks that are related to 5G. It sort of levels the playing field for many industries. And so the fact that it's a little bit like the cloud, right? In the past, we used to have that onion approach, right? Defense in depth. As you're moving to the cloud, you're getting better service, you're getting more resilience. But really, one vulnerability, one 0 day can affect everyone. Yep. And so I think those are the two things that I think we're going to see some big ones. Critical infrastructure and industrial on the one hand, and that supply chain that's dependent on a third party and a fourth party sitting somewhere on the cloud, serving half of humanity, that goes down like that.
I heard Kevin Mandia from Mandiant talk the other day about 2021 was the largest number of 0 days that we had seen, over 60, I forgot the exact number, 68 0 days or some number right in that range, versus in the 30s the year before. And it really kind of shows this elevated threat environment and the diversity of those 0 days across many segments was very fascinating to hear him, talk about. So, on one side, we have this fairly ominous threat landscape, which just keeps driving this perpetual storm of issues. But on the other hand, we're in this pretty amazing golden age of cyber, where companies and growths are amazing and valuation opportunities are incredible too. Nadav, thank you for coming on, my friend. I really have appreciated our 5+ years working together. It's amazing to watch Teammate operate. It is a proud part of my world to talk about what you've done there. And thank you for all the service that you do and companies that you build. And everybody keep an eye on Teammate. And Nadav, thank you. Happy New Year to you and Lahaim. And have fun.
Great year, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Nadav. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. Hopefully you got a lot out of this. We'll have the recording created and posted soon. And I just want to say Happy New Year to everybody who's joined us today. And thank you. Take care and good luck. Be safe.